Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you're listening. In this episode, we're chatting transparency and truth in employer brand, and in particular what that means for content and conversations with current and future employees. Back in March, Edelman's Trust Barometer, they ran a special report in response to the coronavirus pandemic, and this 10-country survey found that my employer was the most trusted institution, and this was ahead of NGOs, government and media by quite a margin. So that's a really big responsibility that's bestowed on employers. So it's particularly important to know how to get this right in the coming months and years ahead. So that's why I'm super happy to have Kane with me today. Hi Ken, how's it going?
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everybody. It's going pretty well considering we're in the middle of a global pandemic and lockdown. Yeah, it's going all right.
What part of the world are you locked down in at the moment?
I'm locked down in Lincolnshire, and
nice.
Thank goodness, a house with a garden, and we've had some good weather to make the most of that.
Yeah, good stuff. It's so thinking about people who haven't got gardens and have to live in flats, and with big families, it's kind of count my blessings sometimes when I think about having things like a house with a few rooms and a garden. It makes such a big difference. So
you have to be grateful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I absolutely share what you say in terms of people who are in limited space with large families. It's pretty challenging. I have no idea what that means.
No, too right. So let's start off with you really telling us a bit about yourself and what you've been up to in 2020.
The 2020 was the year when Simon Thomas and Neil Griffiths and myself decided to launch our new business, a business called Ceriph. We kind of saw the global pandemic coming. We anticipated that we were going into lockdown. We thought that's a really good time to launch a business, and it has proved challenging. Although on the one hand, people say you must be mad, you must be crazy, but the kind of business that we've launched, which is a communications business that helps organisations build an emotional connection with people, one could argue that there's probably not a better time to do this, and it's never been more important in a business context to communicate and build that emotional connection with the people who are part of your workforce.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you've been in the industry for a few years, let's say. I remember we worked together back at Havas.
Happy days, Chris.
So yeah, happy days indeed. So you work with a whole host of clients, of course, over the years. So it's not surprising you guys have kind of set up your own business. And so
I think that was it was kind of we thought we've got a lot of experience. How do we share that? And how do we share that? We don't want to build bricks and mortar. This is a kind of a virtual enterprise, a kind of a cooperative of connected talent that enables us to work with the best of the best and deliver solutions to our clients based on our experience and our understanding, and so far so good.
Nice. And what is it what is it that Ceriph is doing that's kind of filling that gap in the market?
I think the space we occupy, I think common parlance, Chris, would be it's all about EVP and employer brand. And I've been, as you very kindly said, I've been in this business a few years, and I'm kind of in the employer brand space. I'm kind of seeing a sea of sameness, if that makes sense. I don't think it's necessarily been brilliantly creative over the years. I think it gets dumbed down a little bit. I don't think it gets the recognition or the level of investment perhaps that it needs from a C-suite point of view. I think there's been conflict in between HR or TA in marketing, and it's never, I think, never had the opportunity to really kind of come to the fore. And for me, it's one of the great communication is one of the silver bullet, I guess, for talent management. In terms of making that emotional connection and connecting people with the values of an organisation and unleashing that discretionary effort that every organisation strives for. So I think we saw kind of a sea of sameness. We didn't see brilliant creativity or innovation, barring one or two exceptions. And we thought, here is an opportunity to kind of come to market with using our experience to kind of degloss. If you look at a lot of employer brand propositions, they're pretty much the same. There's not much, not much difference between one and the other. And employment is it's not a glossy environment. If you get where I'm coming from, there are challenges, and I think there was a time. This is a time for organisations to be really honest. Say, this is what we offer as a business, and stay true to their values. But equally to say, work is tough. It doesn't go right all the time, and there's characteristics like tenacity and resilience, and all of those things are really important. So for us, it was all about what an organisation gives, but equally what they get back from people in return.
And as you said, look, with the pandemic coming along, I think this is something that's the drum's been banged a lot more than what you're saying, I think, and companies are, I think, being forced to really look at this more, aren't they? And that thing about truth or trust is really important. The Edelman Trust Barometer kind of shows that, something that's pretty, well, relatively hot off the press, where an employer is seen as being a highly trusted source of information. So kind of I'll talk about truth and transparency at the beginning of the episode. So let's get to grips with what truth and transparency means in organizations, externally and internally.
As I said before, I think there's been a gloss to messaging in business. And I think people respond, and the trust bridge is much stronger if you're truthful and if you're honest and if you're open. And I think you get much more respect both within the organisation and outside the organisation if you are truthful and honest, even if you have to convey really bad news. And I think I think organisations shy away or have shied away from being truthful and honest. Some because it may affect their share price. Some because you hear of brand police, and people aren't really encouraged to have a voice in the business. But I think what has been proven is that those organisations who are open and those organisations who are candid, irrespective of it's good news, bad news, or something in the middle, and they enable their people to talk very honestly about their experience of working there, they're the organisations that are going to thrive. You look at Airbnb, for example, a really good example recently where they've had to let go 25% of their workforce. You look at the way they did that. They, organisations need to become much more human in the way that they communicate, and empathetic and compassionate, and all of those good things. The way Airbnb said, we are going to get rid of, we need to lose 25% of our workforce. Yet you had people coming out of that experience being advocates of the Airbnb brand.
I really liked actually what the kind of email that was written. You could kind of sense the pain in the fingertips of writing that email, of how it was really quite a wrench to actually have to do that thing. But what they did was, in terms of that language was great, but also the support and coming up with a platform to help people actually find these people who have been made redundant. It's fantastic.
For me, it's kind of been a bit of a beacon in these kind of dark times. And you're right, you could feel that. I think it was Brian Chetsky, I think, is the chief executive. He was feeling, he was feeling every emotion when he put pen to paper, and it came through and it shone through. And I think he should be respected for that.
There's something actually, was it recently? So, who's the Reddit guy who's married to Serena Williams? Oh my goodness, I can't remember his name. He said recently, that's it, the co-founder. Co-founder Alexei Ohanian actually resigned from the board, and said someone of color should take his place. And I think he did something on Instagram where he said, "I've got to make a stand because, I've got to think about what am I going to tell my black daughter, what I did at this time." My goodness, talk about absolutely sticking to your values and doing something that's important.
And this is where organisations, their values are getting really examined through how they behave. And this might be a good time for organisations to sit down and say the values that we have, are they the values that we're going to go forward with?
Actually, I think one of the Reddit have had issues in terms of this clash between freedom of speech and obviously controversial speech, and so actually I think that's in part he's done that because he knows that something very, very symbolic has to be done, or more than symbolic has to be done, to show that him and the business are willing to make change. I was pretty impressed with what he did there. So I think when I was chatting with Adam Winston, Dawson Walker Communications, and talking about he's doing a series of videos about untapping the power of people, and I was talking about how actually this thing about really letting people be themselves at work, and when you can really, when you're working from home and you've got the family very close by, and people and children interrupting Zoom calls, then actually you are being very much bringing your whole self to work. And when things get back to some sense of normality, although of course we never go back to the way it was before, 100%. But when we do go back, it's like employers just need to continue to let their employees be themselves.
They absolutely do, and I think that's again that helps build trust, that helps build engagement, that helps build that emotional connection between people in business. That employers recognise that if you're working in an environment that isn't the office, then there are other challenges that you have to face as well. Yeah, and
exactly.
Childcare, homeschooling. All of those things are kind of really, really important that people are having to cope with. I think organisations are realising and are supporting that. Some organisations are realising and supporting it, certainly not all.
And when it comes to looking at when is best to be doing this, I mean, obviously, we talk about employer branding. A lot of that is about external communications. Where actually you need to, of course, have authentic content, authentic storytelling, to encourage people who aren't part of your business to want to kind of join the tribe. But what about from an internal perspective?
It all starts from the inside, doesn't it? I'm not a fan of the term necessarily employer brand. An organisation, although it's common parlance, and if you want to grow a business in our space, then you have to use it because that's what people search for, right?
Absolutely.
But an organisation has one brand, and what we're talking about is actually the people dimension of that brand. I would argue that that is the most important piece, because if you build that right connection with people, that right emotional connection with people in your business, then that has a huge impact on the customer experience in terms of innovation, in terms of customer traction, in terms of customer attraction, and that drives greater value in the business, which the people in the C-suite ultimately are going to be judged by.
Yeah. Sure.
So if you look at the relationships between people and shareholders and customers, I would argue that most of the bigger budget should actually be given to the people piece, because they're the people who really drive the change. You can do all the great marketing, but if the experience doesn't follow through on that, people are going to leave your product and move on to another one.
Yeah, that's always something over years that I've it's kind of grated with me a little bit. It's like, what's going on, and it's ultimately, unfortunately, it's because there is an absolute, people see more of a direct link between selling stuff and the budgets they put in, so and if they don't dedicate time and money to sales and marketing, then we're not gonna have a business. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have your people, you don't have a business. And something I said at the kind of in my intro of my kind of trailer to my podcast is recruiting and keeping the right talent is the absolute number one challenge facing organizations.
Yeah,
everything else comes from that.
And if you've got your people connected emotionally, then you have probably the best recruitment network you're going to have. Your own employees, telling stories, and putting those stories out to their network, and feeling as if they're trusted to go and tell others about what it's like to work there, and through whatever channel and whichever format. Arguably your attrition will be down. You won't be spending money on expensive advertising campaigns or recruitment agencies. And just going back to the point you were making before, I think it is a reflection, perhaps, of where HR is perceived within the context of business.
Yeah.
Right, CMO, CTO, CFO have always had a seat at the top table, right? CHRO or CPO, no, they haven't. But I
Crazy.
I think the world is waking up to that.
Totally.
I would hope.
And if it takes things like this, what's happening at the moment, to accelerate that even more, I think it's it's a good thing. It's one of the positives that comes out of these very challenging times.
Yeah, I maybe this is wishful thinking, but I would like to see organisations come out of this pandemic more human, more compassionate, more trusting, because I think those organisations will see the benefit.
Definitely, I've heard time and time again. It's like, I think individually people say this as well. Is that as an organisation or individuals, we look back at this period of time. What can we say about what we do?
Yeah,
it's a bit like the co-founder of Reddit. I look back and I talk to people. What will I say that I've done? And actually, that's something that should always be done, shouldn't it? Really, like, well,
yeah.
And it can be connected with creating legacy or whatever. Particularly with that, people want to feel that they leave something very positive behind. But that's the question that you should really be asking yourself as an individual and organization far regularly than just a global pandemic.
I mean, leaders are leading a human business,
exactly.
Irrespective of the technology and the machines and all of those kind of things. They're leading, fundamentally leading a human business. Look after it, nurture it, grow it. And those attributes of compassion, of humanity, of kindness. You think about what we're going through. Nobody really understands what every individual in the organization is going through. Everybody says we're in a pandemic, but everybody is everybody's taking a different journey through that with different pressures, both physical and emotional. And those organizations who really understand that and support their people through it, they're the ones who are going to come out of this with enhanced reputations, and be the businesses that people believe in, both as a customer and as an employee.
If you look at rise of automation, AI, clearly technology is going to play a much bigger part, in the future of work, and that is been talked about a lot and for quite a long time. There's that importance then on the emotional intelligence side of things at work, and on tapping into the more cognitive roles. And actually, when you know that something more manual can be done, you leave, and you're not expecting humans to do the manual process stuff as much, then you do need to focus more on other things. And actually, I think it forces you to treat employees as individuals more than just a part in the production process. So I think AI as well will escalate that in the same way that the pandemic has.
And I think, broadly, I've never been a fan of that. I think you should treat people as individuals, because everybody's needs are different, and that's particularly acute at this at this time.
Yeah, for sure. And who's doing it well at the moment in terms of being truthful and being transparent?
The business I would always hold up is Gymshark. I think Gymshark do a really good job. They talk about character, they talk about attitude, they talk about conduct, and I think the way the organisation behaves and the way the individuals behave within that organisation, irrespective of where you are. They're really honest and candid. They talk about being grafters, innovators, and visionaries in that order, right? And they talk about succeeding together and failing together. So they kind of eradicate that fear of failure, which we all know in business, nothing goes perfect and nothing is smooth. Yet they talk about succeeding together and failing together. And I just, I think it was Maya Angelou who said this, but this is something which is very close to the core of Gymshark, and that they talk about you'll forget what they said, you'll forget what they did, but you'll never forget how they made you feel.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Absolutely. I think it was her. Yeah,
it was a brilliant quote, and it looks as if Gymshark kind of lived by that. And that seems to permeate not only the experience as an employee, but equally the experience as a customer. And they back it up with just some brilliant stories. You talk about putting your proof where your promise is. And I don't know if you saw this story, Chris, but there was a video on Twitter featuring a guy wearing a Gymshark top, a Gymshark hoodie in the Bronx in New York, right? And he was cleaning up the streets after a peaceful protest had turned violent the night before. Yeah. They found him. The guys at Gymshark found him. And he'd been a customer at Gymshark since 2018.
Right, yeah.
They refunded all of his purchases.
Brilliant.
Right. And when they put it out on social media, they obviously, they gave a shout out to the customer support team for making it happen. But how would that guy feel, right? And he responded, and I think it was Twitter, and he said, Gymshark literally blessed me and refunded me the money I've invested since 2018. Bro, it's 2020. I literally threw up when I kept getting text messages about refunds. And, that there's an old adage, isn't it, that people make decisions not on that's the job I want, but that's the organization I'd like to work for, right? And Gymshark are absolutely true to their values. They're very human. They're very empathetic. And I just love the way that they're tackling it. It just seems that every message you see through social media, or whether it be on LinkedIn or whether it's something out in the press, seems to be a reinforcement about the soul and the very essence of what Gymshark is about.
And it's about actions, not just statements. It's actions and gestures, and that is a brilliant example. And
it's about putting their proof where their promises, right?
Absolutely.
And I think there's some extraordinary claims out there by organisations, but actually, if you kick the tires, are they living it day to day? And are there people telling the world about it? I would argue probably not.
Yeah, and in brand guidelines, within this, employee brand guidelines, is kind of often talk about what you should say, and actually, the extra dimension is looking at, okay, well, if we're saying this, what do we do? And Gymshark absolutely do it, and they've that quote you said is on the walls in their in their office, and often heard that having that kind of stuff, or having your values and statements on a wall in office, is just kind of lip service. Well, it is, unless you back up what you say with action. So it's Gymshark are absolutely putting it on the walls to remind people why they're here and why they decided to join, but emphasizing it 10, 20, 30, 40 times with actions like that.
But equally, I think what that says, and I've never been into a Gymshark office. I've got a Gymshark top, but I probably shouldn't have. Is that when people see that, and people are posting on social media or putting messages out on social media, or whatever they are doing, the context of that is kind of ingrained is, if what I'm going to say, or if what I'm going to do, how is it going to make the customer, or how is it going to make my colleague feel? If you've got that kind of ingrained in the people, then the manifestation of that is a great place to work. Is a great customer experience. Is a great candidate experience. Don't get me on the candidate experience. Is a great customer and a great candidate experience, and the kind of the reputation of the business, grows in the right way.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're a great example, and they've got a founder, is it Ben Francis, is under 30, and taken the business very far very quickly. It's kind of, it feels like it's you got see millennial generation are very much in work, have been for a good chunk of time, and Gen Z on now entering the workforce as well. It feels to me there's this is a clear example of someone who is grown up in different environments, and that's therefore causing this company to be like this. And I think it's just natural for someone like Ben Francis to do these things, say these things, whereas with other companies who have been around for longer, maybe it doesn't feel so natural to do that.
Indeed. Yeah, and on the other side of the coin, but equally as good, is you look like Cisco, one of the established global brands. It's a hashtag, we are Cisco. They enable and trust their people to go and tell the story of Cisco. And is it 48,000 people have done so on Instagram? I mean, that's huge.
Yeah,
that is an organization who kind of has let go. They are classed as a big corporate, but yet they appear to have created this kind of culture of trust.
actually when you search for Cisco careers,
Mm-hmm.
the top result obviously is a Cisco careers website, and the description of that search result is join the We Are Cisco tribe. Very much saying, you're joining a group of like-minded people, and that is being proven by the fact that hashtag is being used thousands of times on Instagram. It's great.
Yeah, it's a very different business to Gymshark. Come from a kind of a very different heritage, yet their values seem to run true, and extolling those values and sharing the proof of their promise, if you like, is interested out to their people, and their people seem very happy to do it.
I really like what they're doing as well about so they got on their homepage got a blog post about Jared, who works at Cisco. This is my new job, which is life as a working dad, and it's so far away from a usual employee profile. It's literally tapping into the experience that this guy has had, becoming a new father. And goodness me, if you've got kids, you remember what it's like, the experience he had, which was, when you take your child from hospital and you go home, you realize, wow, okay, this is real, and we've just got to get on with it. And so that's really, really powerful, I think. And it's not banging on about the values of Cisco, but by reading it, you are feeling what that organization stands for.
You absolutely are, and you're able to identify yourself in that business. It brings a rich the kind of diversity of the organization. It shows it seems to be an inclusive business through the stories that it's telling through its people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there are two great examples there. And what I'll do is I'll drop in the episode description, dropping links to what we've been talking about, because I think it's there's a whole load of stuff that is worth people looking in a bit more, and like looking at what Gymshark are saying, and what Cisco are doing in terms of the content they're creating. It's two very different organizations, aren't they? One is very established and been around for a long time, and the other, in terms of Gymshark, is a newer company, but they still take the same kind of approach about being kind of very kind of truthful and transparent. And actually, with Cisco, what I really like about it is the fact they've got, what is it? So 40 or so thousand, nearly 50,000 We Are Cisco hashtags on Instagram. Means that, as you say, they are, their employees are getting involved in creating, content from their experiences, and particularly from lockdown. So lots of photos of people working from home, family and pets, cats and dogs at laptops. That's a popular one. But for me, this is where they've actually just trusted their employees to get on with it, and kind of it's made me think of, well, companies often, especially when social media came along, is like, right, let's do social media guidelines, or let's have a social media policy. And that kind of, for me, is more about what you shouldn't be saying. And actually, what this is a good example of is actually going, well, no, this is what you can do, and actually just letting their employees get on with it.
I don't know whether this is a sensible parallel, Chris, right? But
no, go for it.
You're much more of a social media expert than I am. But when LinkedIn and social media kind of first came to the fore, a lot of people resisted sharing.
Yeah,
they kind of thought that what they knew was their own IP. Yeah, and there was some value in that. But what's been proven over the years is that the more you share, the more you get back. Yeah. If you put that in a business context, then kind of shutting down what your employees say and controlling what your employees can say through social media about your business, maybe this is the change where the more you enable and open up your employees to tell your story, then the better it is for business.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's a good parallel or a bad parallel, but
No,
it just
definitely.
seems sensible. Yeah.
Definitely. It goes, fundamentally it goes down to that trust, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Bring someone into a company because you trust them to do a job for you, and you trust them. You should be trust them in many ways. And if the trust isn't there, then perhaps actually the hiring process or the messaging was put out in the first place and the content was created, it wasn't in line with what you're about as an organization.
I mean, people work in different ways. I think organizations, you talk about bringing your whole self to work. I think a big part of that is enabling people to work in the way where they are most productive.
Yeah.
Whether that is, in a remote environment, and whether it's in an office environment, or whether it's in a combination of the two. I think, what is workspace? How do you define workspace now? Because I think it's very different for different people. I think if you look at some of the reports that have come out about Gen Z are much more they're keen to get back into an office environment because of the social context in which they're going to work. Yeah. Organizations, I think, have to have that kind of flexibility to enable their people to be as productive as they possibly can be. And that then changes or certainly impacts upon the nature of what leadership then looks like.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think that your point about reports saying that Gen Z wanting to people at age group wanting to have an office environment is shows that actually it's important to have that blend, because yes, you can absolutely have that feeling of connection outside of the office. And I think the number of Zoom calls and quizzes that companies have had with their teams shows that actually you can create a good team environment, feeling of togetherness through technology. But you do need that blend with actually getting together face to face. It's just human to do so.
Well, I think not only that, but I think as a leader in the business, all of these Zoom calls and all of these all of these Teams events, both social and work, there is a big emphasis, I think, on leaders to pick up the phone to people who are in their team and just not talk about work. And just say, how are you?
Exactly.
How are you feeling?
Yeah.
What can we do to help? Those are the things that I think probably make the biggest difference at this time.
Yeah, and actually, if you have that as clearly as the only focus of the call, then it isn't that classic thing of have a bit of general chit chat and now let's get on to business. Okay, how you doing? Yeah, what you've been up to? Oh, and now can you do this bucket load of stuff for me? It's just Chris, all about how can I help you?
Yeah, if you've got your leader ringing you and saying, listen, don't want to talk about work. Yeah. I just want to check on you to see how you are. How would that make you feel?
Yeah, totally.
That says, I care about you. I want to hear how you are. I want to help if I can. Those things are really, really important. Small things. That's not AI. That's not technology.
Exactly.
That's not big strategic stuff. That's 3 words. How are you? Yeah. Or can I help? Those things, you talk about making an emotional connection. Those things are huge. 3 words, massive impact.
So it's those gestures, isn't it? It's just those little things. There's a great TED talk by, it's quite a few years old now, but Rory Sutherland of Ogilvy talks about, sweating the small stuff, look at the little things here and there that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, but actually can have a big impact. So I'll drop that into the episode description as well. Good, we could have a whole other conversation about that, but I think we've got a few more minutes left, so I think let's so should we kind of leave with just a few things that you think that, say, employers could do to kind of not just set themselves up for, getting through the next few months, but what they can do to set themselves up for the next decade and beyond.
I could go on about this forever. I think if I could summarize it in what I'd like to see, find your story, be more human, and when I say human, I mean more compassionate, more understanding, more supportive. Trust your people.
Yeah, nice. And actually, that's why it's great. You've got Gymshark as an example. It's not surprising if you've got Gymshark as an example. I think people spend a bit of time looking at that and seeing what they do, and go onto their social and look at what they're doing. And in terms of actually the response to see what's been going down in the last week in terms of Black Lives Matter, and the gestures that they've made, in the great scope of business, those gestures aren't expensive. But
it was
very, very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, this is a subject on its own, a very big one and a very important one. There was a guy on, I think it was on Newsnight last night. He was all over the news, and he talked about he's seen a lot of statements from big corporates, talking about their solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, And he said when he went to those businesses online, he didn't see anybody like him in the boardroom.
Oh yeah.
Didn't see anybody like him lower down in the business.
Yeah.
But actually, when he walked into the business, he saw people like him who were the cleaners.
Yeah.
Let's get away from the big statements and the platitudes, and let's see some action to address, address these really important issues and bring some balance and some fairness. That is critical, but that's for another podcast, Chris.
No, totally. Well, thanks very much. Really appreciate it, Ken. It's been good to chat as always. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your day and your week, and
you.
Yeah, we'll catch up soon.
Stay safe, Chris.
Cheers, mate. Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to follow or subscribe for the latest episode drops. And don't forget to get in touch if you want to contribute.